Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and as usual, I have to reset my volume. There we go. Let me get the mic right up here. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it up close and personal. Um, first things first, had a fantastic trip to Panama. Um, I can't say enough about the wonderful people we stayed with. Podcast listener, listens to the Talamanca Review, fellow Canadian, and his lovely wife. And it was a little bit of city living in the midst of my jungle adventure. And I want to take the opportunity to, explain a little bit how life works. And this is quite a story, so I'll try to tell it quickly because I have a podcast planned tonight. I'm doing a political podcast tonight. Okay, so it's not going to be. I mean, they're always different. I do politics different than other people. I look at it from other dimensions and other perspectives than most people look at politics. I bring an extra sensory perception to it, an extra dimensional perception to it. So it's not really politics only. But tonight we're going to just do a deep dive on Ukraine and what I think about this situation. But before I get to that, so my brother-in-law, who's the baby of my sister's family of 11 kids, he took us down to town to catch the bus to go 2 hours to San Jose to be beside the airport the day before. And we stayed with friends of the family. So when we were in town, we stopped at the grocery store to get some supplies for Bob, who was going to be up here alone for 5 days. 5 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, like 4 nights, 4 or 5 nights. He really enjoyed being up here alone. It's very peaceful when you're up here alone. You can really get into your thoughts. But right in the grocery store, in front of at least 100 people, my brother-in-law got arrested for unpaid child support. Leaving a couple of questions. And when you get arrested, it's I should start by saying that 60% of the people in jail in Costa Rica are in jail for unpaid child support. And you have to pay, or you get a 6-month sentence. And jail's not too much fun over here. I mean, it's not fun anywhere, but it's really not fun over here. This is the first time my wife's ever been out of the country. First time she's ever had a passport. First time she's ever been on an airplane. And the whole thing is stained right at the beginning by my idiot brother-in-law. So I paid the back child support, which is $1,400 US, which seriously cut into my budget to buy shoes and stuff for the younger kids who are going back to school, because there's a lot of people in my family I like to take care of. And I got these 2 idiots, my stepson and my youngest brother-in-law, who are just total fuck-ups, always needing 500, 800 US here, and they don't change. And I'm headed for a very serious confrontation with my wife here, because I'm not going to bail these guys out anymore, because they don't change and they don't appreciate the help. So anyways, it's a somber thing to start a podcast with, my first one in 5 days. I apologize for that, but that's what happened. Then he picks us up today at the bus station in town after an entire day of transit that begins by leaving the condominium in Panama City at about 10 minutes to 10 to be at the airport in Panama at 10:30 to make a 12:30 flight, and then a $30 cab ride from the airport to the bus station and a 2-hour bus ride from the city to the town where the bus drops us off. And then my brother-in-law is supposed to pick us up and take us back to the mountain. And he shows up drunk. I don't even know what to think about this. He was doing so good. And, you know, I mean, I don't know. The guy's about, I don't know how old he is now. He's about, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 40. But anyways, that's how the whole thing started. And it's like there's just this thing going on in this family here. And I don't want to be a part of it, but, you know. And then we had to get that all sorted out. And I guess you could say it got sorted out. But it's just such an ugly thing. You know? Just such an ugly thing. Anyways, that's my intro. Lovely time in Panama. Was a really nice trip. It was nice to get away. But just the drop-off and the pickup bookended by this idiot brother-in-law who just, you know, the guy just narrowly escaped a 6-month jail term. And he can't even fucking... And he's driving my vehicle, drunk. Okay? So yeah, anyways, that's that. I got to get that off my chest. Maybe I shouldn't have said that publicly, but I got to vent. So, tonight I want to talk about what happened in the White House. And we're going to start with some input here. Let's refresh ourselves what happened.
What if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. but you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that. All right. We'll see what we can do about putting it together. Thanks.
Okay, so there's been a lot of blowback on this. You know, I got some clips. We'll take a look at what the public thinks about this. You know, the first thing you got to point out, Zelensky has one of the worst coke sniffles I've ever seen in my life. That's a coke sniffle that he's doing all the time. That's from doing a lot of coke, okay? I think Zelensky's a piece of shit. I think he is the hero that we deserve. And by we, I mean the stupid West, the stupid American liberals. He's the hero that they deserve, because he's not a hero. And they don't perceive correctly. And with every step we go into this Trump administration, I could not be more proud of the fact that I have unfailingly supported this guy. Okay? And he's not an easy guy to support, because he's an asshole. Okay? I'm not a MAGA guy. But I'm about let's save the world and avoid a really dark future guy. Okay? And I don't know if I'm the only one who can see this, but it seems I just get demoralized sometimes, you know? How stupid people are, how incapable they are of meaningfully participating in what's going on in the world. Now I'm going to show you another clip. You could call it Catamite Parade Part 2. It's all the fruitcakes, all the globalists, all the bought and sold puppets that are being led by the World Economic Forum, that are banging the drum of climate change, and that are, quite frankly, massively depopulating and demoralizing their own people. And these are all the people standing against Trump right now. Here they are. And they got together to show solidarity with Zelensky. And so it has to be pointed out that the unique characteristic of the first Trump administration, one of the unique characteristics, there were many unique things, but one of the unique characteristics of the first Trump term was most of the anti-Trump sentiment was internal to the United States. Okay? So the deep state had most of its power, and the deep state is real, and it's not the people you see. It's not Chuck Schumer. It's not Nancy Pelosi. It's not people like that. It's not Joe Biden. It's not Barack Obama. They're actors, and what I'm calling the deep state are the directors and casting directors who hire them to play those parts, and they're given marching orders. They don't even understand what they're talking about half the time. Trudeau has no real understanding of what he's speaking about most of the time. Starmer has no clue what he's talking about. Emmanuel Macron, maybe, but I don't think he knows too much what he's talking about. And they're all, look, you're going to have to forgive me for saying this, and I think maybe in deference to the Trump term, I'm just going to become more and more politically incorrect. Okay? They're all fruitcakes, man. They're all fucking deviants. Macron marrying whoever the fuck that thing is that he married. Justin Trudeau being an elite mind control child, the son of Justin Trudeau. A total fucking freak, also a pedophile. His roommate in college was arrested for distributing child pornography. They had a family friend who was arrested in his 60s in Nepal on an international warrant. I think Trump's people went and picked him up in the first term. And he got arrested for molesting boys in Nepal. And he was a UN appointee by Canada, close friend of the Trudeau family. Justin Trudeau had his 12-year-old girlfriend when he was in his, I'd say, late 20s. There's pictures of them. There was a non-disclosure agreement signed, and the girl's family was paid $2 million. And all of this took place walking distance from Robert Pickton's pig farm, where a conservative estimate might be 100 women were murdered and tortured, murdered, and cannibalized. Prostitutes. These are the people we're dealing with. I don't write fiction anymore. I write nonfiction. Go back and use The Devil in Us as your reference point. Go back and read or listen to the Human Devil chapter. I put it up on Substack. It's up on YouTube as well. These are the people we're dealing with. I don't know what it is, but people just can't maintain continuity of consciousness. We're in an epic battle for the survival of the human race now. An epic battle. And people just can't get it right. I don't blame them per se, but it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome or something. People just cannot think right. Anyways, here's the Catamite Parade.
Please stop.
Right, thank you.
So that's the agenda, and we need to agree what steps come out of this meeting to deliver peace, true strength for the benefit of all of us. So let's get started. I think we'll pause just for a moment whilst the cameras leave, and then we can start the meeting properly.
So that all took place after the White House meeting, so Zelensky flew right to Europe and had that put together. And the single message from that meeting is that Europe and the world, including Canada, my home country, are turning on and against the Trump administration and trying to isolate them, which is going to be a huge mistake. I mean, this is exactly what happened with Hitler in World War II. Okay? And everything you've been told about that war is a lie. Everything these people say is a lie. And I guess if I have one job as a podcaster now, other than trying to motivate you to lead a rich and examined inner life, which is the most important thing, because all of this is nonsense. But we live in this environment and we're affected by it, so I'm going to do political podcasts from time to time. That's all there is to it. But if I have any value in this political space, it's to realign your perception and to give you a rock-solid position so you can go out into public and win a debate with anybody on this topic. Now, there's a line I used. It's a Bruce McDonald original. I think I first wrote it in the Galactic Historian book. And then I repeated it, or I used it conceptually again in The Devil in Us. And the line goes something like, to understand the truth of something, you have to understand both the context, meaning that you have to get the context right, okay? Context is important. And the other thing is you have to have the details right. But the details have to be in the right context. And one of the main ways that we are manipulated is by the use of correct details in an incorrect context. And they do this by a technique in MK Ultra that's called psychic driving. And it basically means the relentless repetition of an idea until the mind is broken down and it accepts it. Okay? So at a detail level, if you disagree with them, you're going to look stupid because they're factually correct. And by ramping up the emotion, which is a component of the psychic driving, they make it impossible to discuss context even though their context is wrong because you look insensitive. This is how they do it. It's very simple. We as a collective, the media that is self-propagating, self-articulated, self-funded, and I guess you could say alternative, we've been hammering away at these points for a long time now. I think David Icke is brilliant at it. I don't agree with everything he does. And he hasn't grown. There's a very interesting thing about David Icke is he hasn't grown since he first came out in the mid-90s. He's just like the same guy. It's the same circus act. You know, it's like a stand-up comedian. You got to change your material every few years or you can't go back out on the tour circuit. If you're George Carlin and you spend a year or a year and a half doing 180 cities on the 7 Dirty Words tour, you can't, after that year and a half tour, take 2 years off and redo it with the same material. 7 Dirty Words tour, George Carlin. You got to get new material. You got to write new jokes. Not quite sure what the context was I was going for there, but it'll come to me. These people in power, they can't... They're very unoriginal. They keep doing the same material over and over again. It's the same story. It's like Die Hard. It's the same story over and over again. It's slightly different details, different context. Same thing with John Wick. You know, they might be innovative action entertainment. I'm not going to call them art. But they might be innovative action entertainment when they come out, the first instantiation. But the repetition just gets stupid. It's just, you know, they've burned out John Wick now. They burned out Bruce Willis as Detective John McClane in the Die Hard series. You know, it's like they treat us like children, right? And I guess the truth I have to come to terms with, and I don't say this to be derogatory, but the truth I have to come to terms with is how stupid people are. And why wouldn't they be stupid when you think about it? The parents are stupid. The education system is stupid. Everything around them is stupid. How are they going to get intelligent? The only people I've seen grow into real intelligence are people who begin to get into the development and expansion of their own perception and the pursuit of a higher love. You know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to use the old language. Trying to be new here, trying to be a an old dog with new tricks. And that's what produces real intelligence and real perception. And sometimes you can't articulate it because everything around you is so corrupt that there's just no way to express it, right? It just doesn't work somehow. Anyways, let's take a look at Starmer. He's got some things to say.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
Pretty sure that dude's a catamite. I don't know, man. Like, what is with all these guys? Sensitive feminist men with failed marriages who are closet homosexuals or really perverse, leading all these countries. I don't fucking get it. I mean, you're being told everything. Candace Owens has done a brilliant job, deconstructing the ridiculousness of the Macron marriage. Many Canadian investigators have exposed the ridiculousness of Trudeau. He's gay, folks. He's gay and has pedophilic leanings. Okay? And I don't think he's really gay per se. I think he was just raised in a certain way where it's the response to his own trauma. And I suspect Starmer's the same way. Might have a wife, might, and look, if they're so serious about their values, why don't they just come out and tell us who they are? Why don't they run as who and what they are? Why didn't Barack Obama run as a man married to another man who likes to dress up as a woman? Why didn't he do that? What if they have no shame and they think we're crazy because we haven't been sexually liberated the way they have, and by the way, that's how they think. There is a sexual intelligentsia in the shadows of Western society. And they believe, and they talk about this openly among themselves, that in some pseudo-Freudian model, and Freud was a psychic terrorist and a rogue Kabbalist and a horrible human being, and if there's a hell, he's probably there. Okay? They believe that all of the ills of the human race are the product of our suppression of our natural sexual instincts, which are to go to a playground and masturbate while you watch children play, or fuck your neighbor's wife, or fuck men and women, or go to orgies, or have sex with children. Now, I'm not making this up. This is what they really believe. You don't know about it because they don't publish, because they follow the Obama rule, which is the Mossad rule. It's a war by deception. But every once in a while, they get a leader in who goes too far and gives the game up a little bit, like Kathleen Wynne in the Ontario Premier, where a premier is a governor in the Canadian parliamentary system. And the sex education system she brought into elementary schools in Ontario, what she called a long overdue overhaul of our sexual education. Now, why would that be a priority for a lesbian woman? Nobody's telling her she won the election as an open lesbian. She campaigned with her partner. I don't have anything against lesbians, But why did she make it a priority to change the sex ed curriculum? and to introduce sodomy to 6-year-olds in grade 1. And the anus is an erogenous zone when it isn't. And we know this because of the medical crisis in the homosexual community. The anal polyps, the anal tearing, the sepsis, the blood poisoning. You're not supposed to be putting things up your ass, folks. I don't know how much more plainly I can say it. No offense to gay people, but you know this too. Probably because of the health problems you've had. Okay? If two men want to live together and call themselves a couple and have some form of intimacy that gives them both pleasure and release in whatever way they want to do it, that's their business. If this is a free will space, I have no right to say they can't or shouldn't do that. I have no right to judge it. Okay? I don't. And neither do you. Okay? But that doesn't take away from the biological fact that men aren't supposed to be humping each other's asses. That's a medical reality. Okay? You know, briefly to just touch on this topic, because it's a backdrop for so much of what's going on in the world, and the multiple genders of the Talmud, and the dark sexual deviance of the Kabbalists and the Masons, you know, which got Stanley Kubrick killed, right? That was a Masonic ritual he showed in Eyes Wide Shut, and it got him killed. So if they're not ashamed of what they're doing, and they think they can make an argument that the world's problems are the result of what they say those problems are the result of, why do they do it in such a backhanded way? Why did Barack Obama pretend to be married to a woman and to have sired 2 children which are not his? Why did Justin Trudeau pretend to be happily married to Sophie Gregoire, his wife, and have 3 kids when he really prefers this more perverse man-on-man sex or man-on-child sex? Why don't they just come out and say, I'm a man who believes in sex with children, and I think the world is ready for me, so I'm going to campaign on that. But they never do they? And that should tell you something. They never do. Okay, so let's take a look at what the left is saying about what happened in the Oval Office with Zelensky.
We have some big news right now. A massive protest has broken out in the center of New York City, Times Square. Protest is a massive pro-Ukraine protest. I want you to take a look at this picture. This is what Times Square looks like right now. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are out in blue and yellow protesting in favor of Ukraine, showing their support for Ukraine after President Zelensky's press conference or Oval Office meeting yesterday, where he was berated by Donald Trump and JD Vance. Here's the thing, these aren't Ukrainians protesting, these are Americans who are protesting to show their support for Ukraine. And right now, European allies of America are actively alienating the United States of America by holding an emergency meeting tomorrow, possibly even discussing an umbrella of nuclear deterrence where they would protect themselves without America. We are seeing a monumental shift here in our nation, but also around the world, and I'll do a full breakdown on my Substack this evening. Subscribe for the link in my bio for free, and follow on for all the news you need to know about.
So there you go. Do these people want nuclear war? Is this what World War III is supposed to be, a nuclear war? Is this part of the Masonic Kabbalistic plan, the WEF plan? Is this part of the dark cult's plan? It's starting to look like it really is. I mean, I said a few years ago that it seemed to me like Biden was doing everything he could to destroy America, whether it be the Afghan evacuation, I got to watch my words here. The medical emergency, which really wasn't a medical emergency, which, oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this on my podcast yet, but something huge happened a week ago. I could have the timestamp wrong on this. It might be a bit older than that, but Bob sent me the X video. They had a court case in Britain where a family took an insurance company to court for failure to remit a life insurance policy. Now, it should be pointed out that it was proven in court that the death was the result of the not mandatory but severely forced medical regimen. Okay? The court ruled in favor of the insurance company to deny the life insurance claim because the life insurance policy was rendered null and void if the policyholder subjected themselves to an experimental medical procedure that resulted in their death. I'm going to let that sink in for a second, because this is huge. Not only did they push that on all of us, Trudeau calling anyone who didn't want to submit themselves to the medical regimen a racist, a homophobe, and a misogynist. Again, further isolating the straight white male. Okay? Which is the only way you're going to win this war, by the way. If you wanted to talk about Ukraine, the only way you're going to win it is if the Western world sends its straight white men of military age to fight. I guess that's the only use we have now, is dying for the Catamites. Dying for the amusement of the Catamites. And they love that shit. There is no way to measure how dark these people are. They're absurdly dark. Okay? So that was the response to, I don't know what to call it. Anyways, let's take a look at what Tulsi Gabbard has to say. So we're going to start to shift toward the correct context, okay? This is stage one.
Here is something that the political establishment and propaganda media don't want you to know. Ukraine's President Zelensky has just banned yet another political opposition party, one that questioned his legitimacy as president, and used Ukraine's Department of Justice to mandate the seizure of this party's members' assets. Now, this is just the latest of Zelensky's actions to do this sort of thing. He began banning major political opposition parties in 2022, when he also started banning TV channels that were associated with his political opponents. And he took over total control of Ukraine's largest television networks, now controlled by their government. Now, Zelensky's presidential term ended on May 20th. He canceled elections in the name of martial law, suspending Ukraine's constitution so that he could stay in power. Now, defenders of Zelensky will say, hey, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They can't have elections. Just stop for a moment and think, if we accept that excuse or criteria for suspending the Constitution and canceling elections, then we should presume that leaders in our own country and our own establishment media will also use this same excuse and rationale when they suspend our Constitution and our elections, since we too are at war with Russia and China. Now, if you think this sounds crazy, look at what's already going on. They've already started conditioning us to accept a dictatorship by rationalizing their own use of our Department of Justice to target President Trump and other political enemies in their efforts to stay in power.
Now, look, I gotta say what I gotta say here, and I repeat myself, but let's just call it part of the Talamanca Review's psychic driving, okay? I don't know what kind of 5D chess Trump is playing with Israel, or whether he's really locked in with those people, I don't agree with what's being done to the Palestinian people. And I thought his plan, uttered aloud for the United States to take over the Gaza, is one of the more ridiculous things I've heard in quite a while. The Palestinian people do not deserve what's being done to them, in my opinion, from a political perspective. From a karmic perspective, there can be no error. Think about that the next time you're whining about something that's going on in the world. Nothing is ever out of place down here because it's all on rails. It's the Adjustment Bureau. Everybody's life is unfolding according to what they deserve, and that includes the one-legged beggar on the side of the highway in New Delhi. Okay? But at the human level, the political level, sometimes it's hard to watch, which is why I try to mitigate these things with a little bit of dimensional perspective, okay? They want us dead. These people want us dead. They're not leaders, they're executioners. Catamite executioners. Deviant, perverted, ritualistic murderers. The worst serial killers you can imagine, on steroids, capable of murdering with glee millions of people with the stroke of a pen. And the only friend we have right now is Donald Trump, minus the Israel fiasco, which I don't quite understand. And he may have a reason for doing what he's doing. I don't see it, but we'll let time tell us what's going on there. And now I saved the best for last, and this is the longest clip. And this is Jeffrey Sachs, and he is going to give you the only context that is true in all of this. And it's all been reduced to a sovereign country has been invaded, which is, of course, Ukraine. Okay? It's come out now that people like Sean Penn were paid from US aid to go over with those shameful meetings where he's giving Zelensky his Academy Award. Oh, no, Sean, it's too much. Zelensky has 12 estates around the world, 3 yachts. He's got about $75 million in cash, 60 million in stocks, and his annual salary as president of Ukraine, which is the poorest country in Europe, and that includes all of Europe, all of those shithole Eastern European countries from the Soviet era, Bulgaria, Romania. Ukraine is the poorest. His salary is $780,000 a year. To put that into perspective for you, Nancy Pelosi's salary is about $170,000. Donald Trump's salary as president, were he to take it, would be around $400,000 US. So the leader of the poorest country in Europe, who has jailed political rivals. This is all going on right now. Tulsi Gabbard's not kidding about this. He's jailed political rivals. How did he get all that money? You know, the most successful comedian in history. He's got more money than Jim Carrey. He's worth about $500 million. Right? And nobody questions this. A sovereign country has been invaded. Ukraine, poor Ukraine. Here's the proper context, and this will round out tonight's podcast, okay?
So let me just explain in 2 minutes the Ukraine war. This is not an attack by Putin on Ukraine in the way that we are told every day. This started in 1990, February 9th, 1990. James Baker III, our Secretary of State, said to Mikhail Gorbachev, NATO will not move 1 inch eastward if you agree to German unification, basically ending World War II. And Gorbachev said, that's very important. Yes, NATO doesn't move, and we agreed to German unification. The US then cheated on this, already starting in 1994, when Clinton signed off on basically a plan to expand NATO all the way to Ukraine. This is when the so-called neocons took power, and Clinton was the first agent of this. And the expansion of NATO started in 1999 with Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. At that point, Russia didn't much care. There was no border other than with the Königsberg, but other than that, there was no direct threat. Then the US led the bombing of Serbia in 1999. That was bad, by the way, because that was a use of NATO to bomb a European capital, Belgrade, 78 straight days to break the country apart. The Russians didn't like that very much. But Putin became president, they swallowed it, they complained, but even Putin started out pro-European, pro-American, actually asked maybe we should join NATO when there was still the idea of some kind of mutually respectful relationship. Then 9/11 came, then came Afghanistan, and the Russians said, yeah, we'll support you, we understand, to root out terror. But then came two other decisive actions. In 2002, the United States unilaterally walked out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This was probably the most decisive event, never discussed in this context. But what it did was trigger the US putting in missile systems in Eastern Europe that Russia views as a dire, direct threat to national security by making possible a decapitation strike of missiles that are a few minutes away from Moscow. And we put in 2 Aegis missile systems. We say it's defense. Russia says, how do we know it's not Tomahawk nuclear-tipped missiles in your silos? You've told us we have nothing to do with this. And so we walked out of the ABM treaty unilaterally in 2002, and then in 2003 we invaded Iraq on completely phony pretenses, as I've explained. In 2004-05, we engaged in a soft regime change operation in Ukraine, the so-called First Color Revolution. It put in office somebody that I knew and I was friends with, and am kind of distantly friends with President Yushchenko, because I was an advisor to the Ukrainian government in 1993, 94, 95. And then the US had its dirty hands in this. It should not meddle in other countries' elections. But in 2009, Yanukovych won the election and he became president, and in 2010 on the basis of neutrality for Ukraine. That calmed things down because the US was pushing NATO, but the people of Ukraine on the opinion polls didn't even want to be in NATO. They knew that the country is divided between ethnic Ukrainian, ethnic Russian. What do we want with this? We want to stay away from your problems. So in February 22nd, 2014, the United States participated actively in the overthrow of Yanukovych. A typical US regime change operation, have no doubt about it. And the Russians did us a favor. They intercepted a really ugly call between Victoria Nuland, my colleague at Columbia University now, and if you know her name and what she's done, have sympathy for me. Really. Between her and the US ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, who's a senior State Department official till today. And they talked about regime change. They said, who's going to be the next government? Why don't we pick this one? No, Klitschko shouldn't go in. It should be Yatsenyuk. Yes, it was Yatsenyuk, and we'll get the big guy, Biden, to come in and do an attaboy, they say, you know, pat him on the back. It's great. So they made the new government. And I happened to be invited to go there soon after that, not knowing any of the background. And then some of it was, in a very ugly way, explained to me after I arrived, how the US had participated in this. All of this is to say, the US then said, okay, now NATO's really going to enlarge. And Putin kept saying, stop. You promised no NATO enlargement. It's been, by the way, I forgot to mention, in 2004, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, 7 more countries in the not 1 inch eastward. And then, okay, it's a long story, but the U.S. kept rejecting the basic idea, don't expand NATO to Russia's border in a context where we're putting in goddamn missile systems after breaking a treaty. 2019, we walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty. In 2017, we walked out of the JCPOA, the treaty with Iran. This is the partner. This is the trust building. In other words, it's completely reckless U.S. foreign policy. On December 15, 2021, Putin put on the table a draft Russia-U.S. security agreement. You can find it online. The basis of it is no NATO enlargement. I called the White House that next week after that, begging them, take the negotiations. Putin's offered something, avoid this war. Oh, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. Announce that NATO's not going to enlarge. Oh, don't worry, NATO's not going to enlarge. I said, oh, you're going to have a war over something that's not going to happen? Why don't you announce them? And he said, no, our policy is an open door. This is Jake Sullivan. Our policy is an open door policy. Open door for NATO enlargement. That is under the category of bullshit, by the way.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. It's no more complicated than this. Believe it or not, in this situation, Russia is morally and ethically correct. Okay? I know that's hard for some of you to get your head around, and I'm speaking to someone who keeps sending me emails telling me how evil Russia is, and I'm not saying they're not. Oh, Bruce, they've written white papers, they want to go back to the old empire. Okay, maybe, but we're not yet a pre-crime society. This is not that Tom Cruise movie, okay? They have behaved well since the end of the Cold War. And as Jeffrey Sachs said, they have sat back and swallowed some pretty bitter stuff, like the bombing of Serbia, okay? How long would you take it? And my final thought on this, to give you the absolute simple context of what Russia is going through now, in the global community, they're the straight white male. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.